This is Your Life on Code, episode 4. Welcome to episode 4 of the This is Your Life on Code podcast. I am your host, John Morris. This podcast is dedicated to you as a coder and talking about the things outside of technical skill that are the keys to your success as a coder, because there's an awful lot of things outside of whether or not you know how to write proper PHP or HTML or CSS or JavaScript syntax that are going to determine whether or not you're a successful coder. So that's what this podcast is dedicated to. It's the sister content, or it's the companion of all of the different technical tutorials I do. So if this is your first time on the podcast, welcome. If you've been here for a while, welcome back. And in this episode, I'm interested to see what you think of this podcast, because this podcast may be a little difficult. And I say that because we are going to talk about something that is frankly difficult to talk about, but it's there. It's the reality of what it is that you have to do as a coder, what it is that you have to face as a coder. And so even though it's difficult, it's very important that we talk about it. And ultimately, I want you to understand that you're not alone, that we all go through this. I spend my days around other coders who are very highly skilled coders who, for all intents and purposes, you would think wouldn't have this particular problem, but they do. We all do. We all face it. And over time, you can get better at dealing with it. And it's not that it goes away. However, as you get better at dealing with it, the way that you deal with it, you become more effective. And so you begin to notice it a little bit less, although it's always still there just a little bit, but it's easier for you to overcome. So what am I talking about? Well, what I'm talking about is fear. And again, I know that when I say that, you may immediately go, oh God, here we go. We're going to get into the self-help mumbo jumbo, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to hear this. Here's the reality. I know, without a doubt, that already in your coding career, you have experienced fear and it's limited you in some way. And I know that in the future, you will experience it again, and it's going to limit you again if you aren't able to deal with it in the proper manner. Whether it's feeling fear about taking on a particular client or project that you may think is bigger than what your current skill set is. Whether it's putting your code out there for other coders to be able to look at and analyze and comment on, and oh my God, they might think that my code is horrible, or I did this wrong, or whatever it is, whatever your particular set of fears happens to be. Again, putting your code out there for others to see. Whether you're first starting out and you're kind of struggling to understand it, and maybe you've never struggled quite as hard with something as you're struggling with learning how to code. For me, I've been through all three of those. When I first started learning how to code, I thought most things, I'm a smart guy. Most things I can figure out pretty quickly. Coding was pretty hard to figure out. And that's because it's a totally different, whatever you tackle first, whether it's HTML, CSS, PHP, JavaScript, whatever, the first set of code that you tackle, it's like trying to learn another language. It's completely different from what anything you could ever try to compare it to, or try to base some sort of knowledge off of to understand it. It's totally different. And so it's difficult to learn. I always say the hardest part of coding is learning how. You will eventually reach a point where it all clicks and it becomes easy, really. Not because you know everything, but because you feel like you have I call it an overstanding, not necessarily an understanding, but it's like you get the big picture. You understand it on a conceptual level. And from there, learning individual skills becomes trivial. And so, again, the hardest part of learning, or the hardest part of coding, is learning how to code. And so, again, I experienced that fear of, you know what? Maybe I'll never figure this out. Maybe I'm not smart enough to figure out how to do this. You are. If you've experienced that fear, you are. It just takes some persistence. You got to keep hacking away at it, and eventually, like I said, it'll click and you'll get it. Or maybe, again, it's the fear of taking on a project where you're not sure if you know how to do everything you're going to need to do. It's an ambitious project. It's a project that is going to stretch your skill set, and it's going to force you to learn new things in order to compete. Now, I advocate being conscious about the way you go about taking on new projects. Meaning, I don't think all of your projects should be projects that challenge you and stretch you as far as you can be stretched. Because if you do that, it's going to overwhelm you. It's going to really stress you out. And it's ultimately going to lead you to a point where you don't deliver. You could ruin your reputation. You could make your life miserable, so on and so forth. I think you need to have a good mix of projects where you are confident that you can execute that project, where maybe you feel like it's easy for you to complete that project, and projects that challenge you. So I have this theory that as an individual, now if you own a company, obviously you have a bunch of different coders that you work with or that work for you, or however your business happens to be set up. But if you have that scenario, obviously this won't necessarily apply. But if you're an individual freelancing, doing projects on your own all by yourself, which is what I do, then I have this theory that about 4 to 5 projects at one time is the most that you can manage. If you start to get beyond 4 or 5, it really starts to stress your limit of what you can output. Not necessarily in a time sense, but just in a sanity sense. For me, most projects that I do, it's not about the time. I have the time. It's whether I want to spend 24/7 coding. Because again, if you've gone on a code marathon, you know that after a certain number of hours, your brain starts to get a little weird. It starts to really mess with you a little bit. You have to have some time to step away. And about 4 or 5 projects is the point where you find yourself not having time to step away, or at least have enough time to step away. So again, for about 4 or 5 projects is my theory on about how many you can take on at one particular time. So of that, then I think a good mix of easy projects or projects that you're confident you can complete versus projects that challenge you should really be, if you have 4 projects, should be one challenging projects and 3 that you know you can complete. If you have 5, then definitely only 1 that challenges you and 4 that you complete. And that's because the more projects you are, more projects you have, you're naturally going to be more stressed. And if you have multiple ones that challenge you, it's really going to push you to your limit. If you have 4 projects, you might be able to get away with having 2 really challenging ones. If you have 3, then even more so. But up at the level of 5, you really need to, if you already have 1 really challenging project and you want to take on a new one, you really need to take on something that you know you can execute on pretty quickly, pretty easily. It's not going to stretch your current skill set. So again, that's one of the areas, though, in which you could experience fear around the idea of a project that really stresses your capacity or really pushes you to your limit. And so, again, we don't have to go through all these, but there's a lot of different ways in which you can experience fear. I know you've experienced it. I know you experience it again. And so what I want to talk about is ways in which you can deal with it. So again, first and foremost is what I've already talked about, which is managing the kind of projects that you take on. You really need to be conscious about it. You really need to, the freelancer mindset oftentimes is to just take whatever work you can get. And if you're first starting out and maybe you only have 1 or 2 projects, then sure, that's probably okay, because you need to do that in order for your livelihood. However, if you're at a point where you have multiple projects, you're up 3, 4, 5 projects, you really need to be conscious about the new projects that you take on. You really need to manage it correctly and make sure that you're not taking on stuff that's going to overwhelm you. Because what happens is you take on projects that overwhelm you, and you end up not executing on the projects that are easy for you to execute on. They're easy for you to knock out. You end up finding yourself a little bit stagnated, and maybe you might not work on anything for a day or 2 or 3 or whatever the case may be, because you're so overwhelmed and stressed out. And so, you just need to be conscious of that. And so that's the first thing you do in order to deal with the fear. The second thing is more of an understanding thing. And a lot of times when you understand where something is coming from, then there's not necessarily anything to do. It's just knowing where it's coming from can help you get over it. So knowing where that fear is coming from oftentimes can help you to get over it without having to really necessarily do much about it. And the reality is that my theory, again, is that confidence comes from competence, or you might use the words efficacy and self-efficacy. Efficacy is essentially what you're capable of, or your effectiveness, or your efficacy, how competent you are at something. Self-efficacy is how good you think you are. And so sometimes those can be out of whack, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not going to going to get into why you might be really good at something, but you believe you don't, or you believe you're not. However, for the most part, if you're good at something, you're going to know you're good at something. And so, rule number 1 when it comes to developing confidence, which is the antithesis of fear. So in order to overcome fear, you have to develop confidence. The way to do that is get really good at whatever it is that you happen to have fear around. And so that's not that you'll ever reach a point where you don't experience fear, but what it is that you'll find that projects that used to challenge you and used to cause fear will no longer do that. I mean, when I first started out coding, working with HTML and CSS, I used to experience fear around those things because I was just starting out. I was just learning how to code. Those were things I was learning at the time. And so, I would have certain times where I might have fear come up around those things. Now, I almost laugh when I think about HTML and CSS because it seems so trivial at this point. Not that I'm necessarily the greatest, CSS or HTML guru and know everything about both languages, but there's really not much that I don't feel like I can't figure out how to do or whatever when it comes to those two languages. There's not a lot of fear there. So that comes from using them a lot, having a lot of practice, working with them a lot, and just getting better at using them to the point where I don't really experience a ton of fear around those things. So again, confidence comes from competence, and the best way that you can develop that confidence is to focus on learning new skills, and that's why I think it's important to try to always have at least one challenging project so that you are learning new things. There's really, to not try and get too psychological on you here, but there's really two things that are important when it comes to confidence. There's the confidence that is derived from knowing how to do something. So it's essentially confidence around what you have. It's confidence around, I already have this skill. When you already have a skill, then when you have the competence, you will have the confidence. The other part of that, and this is a particular part of it where I see a lot of people around me really struggle with, and oftentimes I feel like I'm able to separate myself because a lot of people really struggle with this. And the second part of that is you may not know something, but having the confidence to know that you can figure it out, that you can learn how to do something. I'm not a person that believes that there's anything out of the realm of possibility for me to learn. That doesn't mean I'm going to go out and learn how to do absolutely everything that's possible to learn how to do out there. But I believe that if I decided I wanted to learn how to do anything, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even have to be coding related. If I decided I wanted to learn how to do that, I have a sense of confidence that I can do that. And that just comes from my experience and all the different scenarios I've found myself in where I've had to learn new things and had no problem doing it. I see myself as a fast learner, and most people who know me see me as that. And that confidence in that is derived from having done it over and over again in different areas. And so that's why I think it's really important that you always have at least one project that is challenging you so that you can see yourself learning how to do new things that maybe before you were worried you might not know how to do, and maybe you had some fear, and you see yourself overcoming that fear and learning how to do whatever that particular thing is. And as you see yourself do that more and more, not only will each one of those things that you learn add to your competence for that specific skill, and then of course your confidence for that specific skill, and that over time you'll build the number of skills that you have competence and confidence around. But it's also going to allow you to see yourself learning new things and allow you to start to believe that, look, I can learn how to do any of this. And so what ends up happening is the conversation when you approach some sort of project that might challenge you, or learning some new skill that you don't know how to do at that particular point, the conversation goes from, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. I'll never figure it out. My client will be mad. They'll tell everybody they know. I'll no longer get any business. I'll have to go back to doing whatever it is I was doing before. And, it just, the conversation really spirals down into some serious negativity at that point. It goes from that to being more along the lines of, I don't know how to do this, but I know I can figure it out. And that's the point you want to get to. No, there's no coder out there that knows how to do everything. The way the technology advances, there's always new things out there for anybody to learn. Even the best coders out there, the coders that you would think, gosh, these guys know everything. There's always things out there for them to learn. What they have that most coders don't, or at least most coders who struggle don't, is they have a sense of confidence that no matter what comes up, they'll be able to figure it out. And then when those things come up, they go out and they figure them out, and they add that to their toolbox. And so, again, that's one of the really big things you need to focus on when it comes to overcoming fear, is understanding that competence drives confidence. So you can't just will yourself to be confident. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to be more confident. You need to actually do something to prove it to yourself, to make yourself believe it. And you do that through competence, by learning new things, by putting yourself out there for clients, by putting your code out there, and working through all of those evolutions and the growth that's necessary there to get yourself to a point where you have competence and therefore confidence. The last thing that I've learned how to do when it comes to deal with fear, and this is more of an in-the-moment thing. So everything I talked about up to this point is incredibly valid. One, being conscious about the types of projects you take on and not overwhelming yourself. Two, developing confidence through competence in order to overcome fear. The third thing is, in order to develop that competence, you have to go out and do things that are going to be scary to you. And so if you're not able to overcome the fear in those moments when you don't have the competence yet, you have to do something to get over that fear. If you're not able to, then you're never going to be able to develop that competence. And so what I've learned how to do is I use a 2-word phrase in those particular moments that helps me to deal with whatever fear I happen to be experiencing. And I use this when it comes to coding. I use it throughout everything I do in my life. And I was really big into a lot of self-help stuff, and went to a lot of different seminars and took classes and read books, and there's all kinds of formulas and processes and things that I've learned. And ultimately for me, what it distilled down to was, again, this 2-word phrase that I say to myself whenever I'm experiencing some sort of fear. And it's fear when I know that I need to do something. For example, when I know that I should take on this client, even though the project scares me, or maybe the client scares me because they're a big name or whatever, I should take it on. I know I should, but I'm experiencing fear. How do I get over it? Or, maybe it's some new skill you want to learn. You're not sure if you're smart enough to figure it out, and you're experiencing fear around that. But you know that you should learn that skill. You should just dive into it, but it can be difficult because that fear can be very overwhelming. And so this is essentially the 2-word phrase that I use in order to get over those situations. And so I can't actually say it because this podcast is a clean, non-explicit podcast. I need to keep it that way, but the 2 words are essentially F it. So, I'm sure you get what I mean when I say that. So whenever I'm experiencing that fear in the moment and I really need to get over something and I know it's something I know I need to do, I just tell myself, you know what? F it. And it's really weird. You can even say it right now. Even when I'm saying it on this podcast, your attitude about whatever that is immediately changes. Because the reality is, whatever it is that you're facing, whatever fear that it is in front of you, honestly, how bad could it really be if you screw it up? You might tick off a client, they might tell a few people, but at the end of the day, it's probably not going to completely destroy your reputation or your business. The worst case scenario that you can think in your head, the probability of that actually happening is so slim. And even if it did happen, your ability to recover from it or the possibility or probability of you recovering from it is pretty high. So, again, telling yourself, you know what? F it. Let's just do it. Let's see what happens. Let's go for it. Your attitude immediately changes. Immediately, it's almost, whenever I do it, it's almost like the fear just washes away. Now, again, I know that may sound weird. You may not want to talk about all this. You may, in some ways, be in denial about, I don't experience this, whatever the case may be. I know you deal with it. I deal with it even to this day. I know in the future you'll deal with it. And so what I challenge you to do is the next time you feel some sort of fear around whatever it happens to be, but in particular, coding and a project or a skill or whatever, try it. Just try it. Just say it to yourself. You know what? F it. Just going to go for it and let whatever happens, happen. And I'm going to give it my all and give it my best. Your attitude will immediately change. It's like the fear almost completely goes away. Not completely, but it gives you the space you need to be able to take the next step and act on whatever it is that you happen to be, whatever's in front of you that happen to be experiencing fear around. That in reality is the company I work for. That's what led me to getting hired, because they had put out a call for, I happened to be a customer of theirs, and they'd put out a call for employees. And at the time, I really didn't have a ton of confidence around coding, working for a technology company. There were a lot of reasons that I could have told myself not to apply for that position. But at the end of the day, I ended up saying, you know what? F it. Screw it. I'll just put it in and see what happens. And then and I ended up getting hired. And it's been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. It's allowed me to become a much better coder in a lot faster time than I ever would have before. It's allowed me to meet some really amazing people, work with and for those people. It's allowed me to, travel to a bunch of different places around the world, meet a bunch of ton of different people that I never would have met, to work a job that I absolutely love on a daily basis. All kinds of positive things from that one moment where I could have went no and not submitted my application, or yes, and I did, and I just said, you know what, F it. That was literally the conversation that took place and made the difference that allowed me to submit that and all that benefit as a result of that. So again, I know you experience fear. You don't have to tell me about it. You don't have to sit down on the couch and us have a session. But the next time you experience it, just try it. You don't have to tell anybody. It can be for your own, your own self. It doesn't have to be a big ordeal, but just try it. Just say, you know what? F it. I'm just going to do it. And see what happens. See how your attitude changes. See how the fear dissipates, and you're able to actually move forward with whatever it is that you happen to be doing at that moment. And as you use it, you'll start to see there's a lot of other scenarios in your life outside of coding where you can use it as well. Right, so that's the podcast for the day. I know it's a little weird. We got into talking about fear and all kinds of weird things, but there are definitely things that you will deal with as a coder if you haven't already. All right. So again, that does it for this episode of the This Is Your Life on Code podcast. If you want to connect with me, you can head on over to johnmorrisonline.com. You can see all my blog posts, find all my social media networks, so on and so forth, and connect with me there. Also on Twitter at jpmorris, facebook.com/johnmorrisonline, youtube.com/johnmorrisvideo, and Google+. You know how those URLs go. There are a bunch of numbers and so forth. So I would say just go to johnmorrisonline.com. You'll see the links for all those things in the sidebar there, and you'll be able to connect with me there. So thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you want to get the show notes and visit my site to be able to get the accompanying material for this particular podcast, you can head on over to johnmorrisonline.com and click the podcast link at the top, and you'll be able to access this podcast and all the previous ones. So, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.